So welcome to our first podcast. This is Naveen and I. We'll do an introduction because we're starting this series just to talk about our random musings. So Naveen, why don't you introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Naveen. I am I think of myself as a systems engineer. I've been up here for, 11 years, but overall nerd and yeah.
Yeah, I'm a former nerd, so I was general manager now, so you'll get a perspective of both an operator in kind of the role I'm in, and more of an architect engineer from Naveen. But I think Naveen and I were recently talking about the topic that everyone's talking about now, AI. And one of the things we were discussing was AI in music, and where it's going and how good it is. This is a point in time. I think it's going to change probably pretty drastically.
Yep.
But let me start with a simple philosophical question. If AI generates music, then whose music is it?
I think that's a deep question, but I'm going to argue it's not the person who typed some text into an app to create the music. Are they a creator? Yes. Did they create the music? I think objectively you have to say no.
I'm going to go the other way on this one. So this will be an interesting first disagreement. So my son asked me the other day, we were in the car, right? And I used an app called Suno to generate a song about his musical performance at school around how great he was, right?
Sounds pretty cool.
So the lyrics were in a Sinatra Bublé kind of style, fairly Broadway musically. It was probably trained on those voices, but I don't know. I don't know who the artist it was trained on. I don't know what is behind the curtain. But my son made the same argument you made to me. He's like, and he's, by the way, 11 years old. He made the same argument that you're not the artist. And one thing is, I did study music theory and composition.
Yeah.
I have written original scores. I've orchestrated things. So when I came up in the music scene pre-AI, ownership was an interesting concept because there was the writer and then there was the orchestrator. Anyone who is doing derivative work, like I could take a John Williams movie, Star Wars soundtrack, and make it for big band, right? Like take a score someone wrote for 130 people and reorchestrate it for a 12-person big band.
Yep.
I actually did that in the past. And I wasn't the writer of the song, I was the orchestrator, but I owned my orchestrated arrangement.
Yeah.
Like it was an arrangement.
So actually, I think the Oscars has a whole category for this
Right.
in film, right?
Yeah.
So they call it, in music, it would be original score. So
Yeah.
I think maybe the technicality we're getting into is it original score? I think I hope we can agree that using AI is not original score.
Well, so I think it's muddier than absolutely original score.
Okay.
Because in the case of the music, like your training was your teachers.
Sure.
When I grew up, it was like I went to University of Illinois, you went there as well,
Yep.
right? The type of music I wrote, and over time, the training data in music got larger. So in the 1700s, your training set was like Mozart, Beethoven, your classics. And since we've had recordings and the work body has grown through multiple genres of rhythm and blues and jazz and classical and hip hop, and the genre of work that you could learn from has grown beyond the capacity of an individual.
Sure.
So people started specializing. Like I started specializing in more jazz music later in career and classical, and eventually started doing pop arrangements. I've even played at Renaissance fairs at one point, you know what I mean, in my life.
Yep.
But once the sufficient body of training gets large enough, and AI is trained on a large enough set, at some point does it cross a tipping point where the output is so far removed from the input of training that it is original work.
Oh, so all right, hold on. I just want to make sure we're clear. Maybe we're having a semantic difference
We
here.
absolutely
because Because did the AI create original score is a different question than did you create original score.
But okay, now who's the driver, right?
Right,
So
totally.
this is like smart driving cars. When we started smart driving cars, there was a period where I was behind the steering wheel and it's kind of driver assist.
Sure.
And you could argue I was driving,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
And then there was a period where it was like hands off, but we're not going to get rid of the steering wheel because you're still responsible if you kill someone.
Yep.
Doesn't matter if like the car hit somebody and you didn't have your hands on the steering wheel.
Yep.
So, and this was the semantic debate I was having with my son, is I needed to tell it what to do,
Yeah.
right? Because if you bring it back to programming, and I think we had the same discussion in programming in the past,
Yep.
is there was a time when you programmed in C, there was a time when you did C++, Java came around. I left in the web JavaScript era of programming,
Right.
I went from like binary firmware system programming, Cobalt, Fortran, through like Java Web. And then things moved on to Python, but every subsequent language became closer to English, right? So AI prompt engineering right now has a small context window. You can't build an original, what I would consider a really good original composition in what I would consider the Twitter window. So prompt engineering right now is the equivalent of Twitter. You get 256 characters, your context windows are small,
Yep.
the compute and memory segments require you segmenting things up for bite-sized levels of problems
Yep.
that you can based on context windows. As the context window grows larger, like compute and memory and storage and everything's gonna move to larger and larger context windows. Eventually, I might be able to write a 10-page Google Doc essay saying, build me a program to do this, and like the new programming language is English.
Yes, I agree with
Right.
that.
So is the content, so if you agree with that, when you get into music, right? And okay, maybe we might both agree at a 256 character Twitter prompt saying, generate me a blues song about why Pure Storage is better than NetApp, right? Like if I do that, I'm willing to concede the point that, probably less original composition.
Yep.
But if I write a 10-page essay of what I want, how is that different than me writing an orchestral score?
So here's how I would break it down. I think there's a few aspects of the problem. One is because I think the illusion you're making is correct, which is we as humans have our own training set that we've learned over time, and as society's evolved, our training sets have gotten larger, and that's what we use to apply to create things ourselves. I think that was your point about the more sort of what's available to us.
Yeah, you're a product of what you know.
Was your product what you know? Absolutely. But there's a way of looking at this which predates, I think, modern large language models. People call it the RMS loop, so recognition, modeling, synthesis. And computers were evolving where you could do speech recognition, and then eventually you could start to understand modeling. Okay, well, this is the sentence that was actually said, and then synthesis is I can actually make a sentence that did not exist before, right? And I think we as humans, we are very good at recognition, modeling. But synthesis, I think to us, when we create something, is a trial and error skill loop, in my opinion. So we don't start out knowing how to write a sentence, right? We practice. We don't start out knowing how to speak.
But that's how prompt engineering is now. You today, to be effective at prompt engineering, you're not prompting in English. You have to learn the best practices of prompt engineering.
Yeah, but I think it's closer to, this is a bad analogy, but if I want my kids to go do something, I actually start to use prompt engineering skills on them, right? I'm like, I want you to clean your room, but if I tell you to clean your room, you may not actually clean your room, but if I say it a different way, I can get the outcome that I wanted from a clearly sentient being, right?
Yeah.
My child. And I think that's the thing that I grapple with, which is, yes, you were involved. Yes, you had the outcome in mind of what you wanted to achieve, what you wanted to create, the song, right? But there's maybe my take issue with is it's definitely I don't think I can get to a place where I could say you were the sole original composer.
See, and I'm going to push you on it, right? I'm going to see if I can get you there.
Right.
Because I am a composer
Sure.
in the traditional sense.
That's
I
a
understand
really
the
good-
fundamentals of music theory and composition. I understand the fundamentals in when I compose, my artistic process in composition. And I do have it, like I actually have to go sit at a table, I can't be disturbed, I need like, a large time window. I need to be able to hear things in my head and imagine and create. There's a creative process that goes on in my brain. Now, because I have perfect pitch and I had methods classes in college and 30 instruments and I have that training, I can write sheet music out. I can hear it. I don't need someone to play it as I'm composing. I don't need to some people need to like play at a keyboard to compose.
Okay.
Right? I don't need to go to the keyboard because I have perfect pitch, so I can like think through what I want and I can hear the melody in my head. And then when I'm writing multiple things, I can read the music and hear the harmonies in my head. Like I can go through that composition process, right? And so I should, given that I come from that artist background,
Right.
take your point of view in terms of this is my creative space and
That's
creative
right.
art.
I'm like, wait a minute, you're giving me all the ammunition I need.
But like, there's a but here, right? So, when AI in music started coming out, I'm like, dude, this is all synth shit, and it all sounds like bad EDM, right? Like I'm fairly open to most styles of music, but like when we got into the techno EDM, everything sounded like a synthesizer. I became like a classical snob. I was just like, no, this is just the garbage of all the garbage. You know what I mean? And like it might show my age in terms of keeping up with kids nowadays in EDM, but
Right.
I just I wouldn't acknowledge that was music.
Interesting.
Right? So for me, the music had certain things saying how much imagination and how much like effort you put in. And I thought, at the time that like, okay, I was like, synth loop, synth loop plus guitar loop, like I was like, fuck, like that can't be music. Is that really music? If that like, and right now music, like for about 5 years, there's been a debate on podcasts where people are like, is auto-tune, like when you use auto-tune, are you a real artist? You know what I mean? That debate is going on, right? So I was for a long time in your camp, right? And then lately, and this was like in the last month, when AI got better, right? Where I was like, I could write this song, but now this tool allows me to write it faster, right? Because I have to do multiple iterations. Like I have to like, no, that's not right. Bring out the bass. Okay, no, that's not right. The voice needs more of a sad, soulful feel. Like that is the same creative process I go through to create music. So maybe I could argue that a single prompt is not original work. But if you put an hour into the prompt engineering of like adding your creative genius or your creative soul of what you want,
Right.
then is it mine?
So, all right, maybe let's put it a different way. So if you make a movie, I'm trying to think of something that takes a lot of people, right?
Yeah.
There's the end credits where it's like, who did this? Someone produced it, someone directed it, someone blah, right? I'm not saying that you would not have a credit, right? Like I think you have a credit. You played a role. What
But
role
you
that
don't
is?
know the role the other people played because it's behind the black box.
But their names get out there, right?
But right now, I can't tell you what Suno is training, which musician it really copied.
Totally. And so I think, but that doesn't mean that there wasn't one, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So
there is a training basis. We all agree that music has been trained based on prior art.
Exactly. And so, by the way, I think this is the societal challenge we're facing, which is, and if I were an artist and my music was used in the training that was used to synthesize the music that you asked for via prompt engineering, I would want to be credited as an artist in your credit list because.
So do you believe the government should pass policies or laws that, because look, there's the private sector, public sector, and social sector. We've talked about that before, right? Yeah. And the way I define like the roles in industry between the three sectors is historically, the private sector maximized profit and employee shareholder value, right? The public sector set policies and governance around rules and laws, and the social sector, which makes up both like religions, churches, charities, etc., was all about driving ethics and morality, right? And those three things integrated into like in the early style of leadership in the post-World War II era through the late 1970s, early 80s, a good leader was viewed as someone who synthesized and had a third. So you couldn't abdicate responsibility of ethics, morality, social, you had to be integrated, right? And if you kind of, in the Friedman economic model, when Friedman wrote things in the Wall Street Journal, it changed where capitalism became a different capitalism. It became this idea of go where you need to go and maximize profits within the bounds of the law. But it's not your responsibility to set policies. It's not necessarily even your responsibility to worry about ethics. That's the social sector, right? It became disintegrated. All three are important, right? But it became disintegrated. So now if I bring that back to AI, like there used to be a time where in the private sector is a private sector person, like in the artist film industry or a music producer or a studio, the executives of the company had to make the decisions of what's ethically moral, what's the policy that we want to do, and maximizing profit, and balance those three things. As society has disintegrated those three things, the music studios generally are there to optimize profit. And they're letting the government take a role in setting a policy, right? They're like, it's not my responsibility to decide what's legal and fair.
Sure.
So do you believe the government should set policies for AI in music today, or do you believe that's in the arms of the studios?
So I think for me, so just I guess personal bias, I think the government would F it up. So I kind of want the government out of the equation, right? But maybe there needs to be a law. What it would be, I don't know. The problem, however, is even if I were to take it from any of those angles, let's say it's just social. I want to say, hey, it's wrong for you, Prakash, to use AI to generate music and then not acknowledge the people who created the music.
But how would I know?
That's the key. So it's not. So if I give you a different alternative, let's say you had a tool where you could generate the music, and then along with the output, it could give you, hey, here's your credit list.
Yeah.
Would you credit them?
Yeah.
But so I don't think that's why I'm saying I don't think we're debating whether or not you created the music. I think there's a challenge of
now
AI has made it opaque where the information came from. We can tap into generic knowledge.
As a technologist, do you think that will be a solved problem? If you're projecting forward, do you like right now we treat AI as a black box?
Yep.
How explainable, would the vector database statistics of AI models become transparent over time?
That's the challenge. I think AI by its very nature is statistical. That's correct. So even when it says somebody is the credit of something, to some confidence.
But here's the thing. If you agree that AI right now is statistical and it's storing things in vectors, then there is a fundamental math model with weights and percentages and inference. Yes?
It's stochastic. I think we should be clear about that, right? So it's not discrete. It's not like...
Okay, but for our listeners, explain what you mean by stochastic, because I understand.
But so I think that the problem is, if I write, you take music, right? If I sit down and, no, this would be terrible. I have no musical background, so I shouldn't do this in any means. But if I just recorded myself playing something, and then I said this was a creation of mine, I would label it, and it would be clearly something that I sat down and created, right? Particularly if I'm playing an instrument directly, right? The problem with the...
Okay, hold on. I'm going to interrupt you right there. when, like, because we write what we hear and we write what we know, humans are pattern matchers.
Yep.
So in jazz, there's a lot of things known as standard riffs. Here's like how John Coltrane did a riff.
Yes.
Here's a thing. So as I'm writing music, I'm always using prior art.
100%. 100%. So
And I'm not referencing prior art as I'm doing it.
I'm hoping that we as a society have agreed, well, maybe we haven't, but here's where I am, which is when any one of us says that we create something,
Yeah.
we're saying it within the context of the knowledge base of the society that we were raised in or educated in. I think there's, like, if I was raised in isolation without any information, I couldn't create anything, right?
Yeah.
So the point of society is to maximize the things or enable each of us to create more than we would be able to otherwise.
So GDP producing.
So yeah, you can put it that way. So I think that that's just a fundamental aspect of humans and knowledge and intelligent life, right?
Mhm.
But what we're talking about here is something different. This isn't that we all as people in society have been exposed to whatever we've been exposed to and can use that to create something new. This is, we are able to take the creations of people to this point in time. By the way, the future is very weird.
Yeah.
To this point in time, put it through essentially a mathematical model that is predicting what the next thing should be based on what it has been told so far, right? And so it's the simplest way I could put it. It's a Markov chain is the way I would simplify it, but it's saying every time I'm going to produce something, I'm going to basically use random chance to decide what the next bit of thing I should create is, and that's very strongly biased based on what I just created or what I was provided. That's the vector kind of database and kind of modeling you're talking about.
So then it should be explainable.
But it's not, and the reason is because there is actually a random function in there. So to get to that next step.
So you're saying the difference between an algorithm and AI is randomness?
Yes, actually. So we were having a conversation about that earlier. That is actually my definition. So I think that when something is an algorithm, it is discrete, it is explainable. So it gets to explainability, right? When something is random in nature, it becomes much harder to explain causality. So I'll take a different field. So physics is very good at understanding things at the atomic scale. Mm-hmm. And based on all of that math, it's very difficult for us to extrapolate who is going to win the next political election.
Okay.
Right?
So
like
you're talking about Heisenberg's uncertainty
right, I mean, like
principles.
the amount of things that are involved in that statistical process just make it very difficult for us to say, well, we have the math.
If there's enough compute and because look, here, let's play it out this way, right? Because there's probabilistic and there's deterministic.
Yep.
So you're talking about things that are deterministic and probabilistic, and I agree that crossing the line to make those two things the same is defining the words and violating the language definition in English, right?
Yeah, right.
So we can agree on that. But when in the field of statistics, you have an R squared and how good the probability theory is. And just like in calculus, you'll never get to zero, you'll approach the limits of zero. Do you get to the point where when you get out of your theoretical world and into a practical one,
yep,
it's explainable because the probability of hitting this answer
is good enough.
Multiple times is good enough
Yeah.
where you could explain it.
I think that's where we'll end up. So I hope, actually. So now, I've never actually thought about this outside of this conversation, but it would be fantastic if, as we're ingesting all of this information from the internet or whatever to create these models, we're careful to worry about attribution and say that this came from this set of individuals and so on, so that when you create something, you can get your attribution list. Now, it's going to get weird because I don't think the AI can tell the difference between, an actual large language model, which is what we're really talking about, or some sort of model like that, is, I guess a generative pre-transformer, it does what we do in our heads, I think, which is it's accumulating knowledge and then being given the ability to synthesize. That's what we agreed on, I think, which is if I do that as a human and I gain knowledge and can synthesize something, I can be a creator.
But most people are using ChatGPT right now and taking the output of what they synthesize and putting it into fact check and clean it up. So that synthesis is going back into training.
Yes, and that's where I think it gets polluted. I think that's so. Let me put it differently, if I create something, just me as an individual, like write some document, and I share it with my friend, my colleague, or whatever, and I say, please edit this so that it, sounds better in this way, or so on. I'm going to give them some sort of credit for helping me for that, with that, right? And I'll claim that when we use AIs to make our output better, even though it's our intent of what we want as the output, the AI helped. Yeah. At a very least, I want to credit the AI.
Yeah, so look, we agree on, I'm going to credit the AI. Like, I'm there. Okay. Now, the problem is we have agreed that the probabilistic statistics, you can't really know real attribution.
Right.
For a while. Hopefully probability gets us to the point at which...
Yeah, I'm pessimistic now that I think through it a little bit, but I'd love to be there.
Yeah, we'd love to be there. Me too, right? So back to my public sector government debate, right? You're given all the power, you are the president, you have to decide what law to pass in AI.
Yep.
Right? That's your job. You're the president, you have a big data commission, whatever, that has to do the thing. What's the law you pass on attribution?
I don't think we can pass anything. I think we would get that horribly wrong.
So then you're just having a theoretical wish list with no practical advice for society?
I'm calling this out as no practical advice whatsoever. I'm calling this out as a existential problem that we as a society have entered into.
Yeah. And we can agree on that.
And I think that the reason why I'm worried about it is if we fast forward 40 years. So let's take an example of the evolution of anything, like be it music or math or art. We've always evolved from the things that we see, the things that we've learned, the things that people did before us, right? Mm-hmm. And we as society have slowly moved these things forward. We've just injected this other weird thing into the equation, which is an AI, which also saw all of those things that humans created, but now it's creating things and publishing them to the same places that we publish things, which it's then going to train itself on. And so now it's part of this weird knowledge base that we as a society are building on.
So would you consider that synthetic data or not synthetic data?
I think I don't know what it is, but I do think we need to think deeply about this. Like this is where, for me, this is why philosophers exist. This is why we need help. Right? I can't answer this. I can make the machinery work.
So do you think? So now that we're in a private sector job, right? Because I brought up the idea of like social, public, and private forces, right, in the past. And I have to decide now as a general manager what kind of leader I want to be. I grew up in an era where you wanted to have an integrated view of leadership where you did what was ethically, morally right, to maximize shareholder values, and you defined policies. So in the role I sit, I can't abdicate.
Fair.
You have to I have to make a call. Yeah. But if we're moving to a society where things are more disintegrated, is my new job to be like, because I think you said something earlier, which I'm going to quote. You're like, I don't want the politicians who don't understand this to make the thing.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of going the other way. I'm like, this occurred to me over Christmas. I went on vacation 2 weeks. I kind of stopped following the news and reading my email and whatever, and I came back and I lost 3 years of evolution of AI knowledge. Like it's moving that fast.
It's moving that fast, yeah.
Right? So, and then I was like, did I just get off the train and I'll never be able to catch the train again? You know what I mean? It felt that way at the time. It was almost existential. And I'm like, is it better to set policy without knowing the details? Because you can ground the policies in fundamentals. Because, this is what, why philosophers get wrapped in their own kind of mental models, right?
Right.
They're unsolvable problems, at this stage. There's always a pro and a con. And is the uneducated better at setting the policy than the educated in this case?
I think... So okay, the reason why I'm worried about the policy is I'm not even sure what we're trying to do. Maybe that's the problem, right? I'm okay with setting a policy if we said, because we're talking about creative
IP rights
and so on, and then we're saying, okay, I don't even know what the outcome would be, but you Prakash cannot claim sole authorship about this. Like that could be a policy.
That can be a policy,
right? But then, what do you claim? And do you say that okay, I need to say that I use this AI? That could be one policy, right?
Yeah.
But then I think it unwinds. It basically says, okay, well, does the person who created the tool that allowed you to create the music that you're now saying helped you?
Yeah.
Does it have to explain how it did what it did, or are you just basically saying I used this thing and it stole a bunch of people's data and was able to create something really awesome, but none of them really wanted that to be used in any way in any public fashion?
Well, look, there's multi-layers of policy setting. There's the consumer side and the private sector side. So as a consumer, like individual, right, you can state that I'm responsible for attributing to the AI.
Yeah.
Now you can assume that you could set a policy that as you're building a model, you must attribute source data.
Yeah.
Right? Like that. Now,
That could work. Yeah.
That could work, right? Now, it's hard. It's sort of like between synthetic data and real data, and
Yep.
like attribution chains, and
Yep.
there could be a whole industry and a sector and a TAM created on attribution chains.
Yep.
Right? Like that is possible, right? And but let's get somewhat philosophical. Why? Hypothetically, what problem are we solving besides vanity? Because if you are we gonna go say you can sue for 0.01% of this thing? What is the where are we going as a society?
I think it's yeah. I mean, it's a good question. So I was thinking about it as we were talking about it. I think there's some fear baked into my thinking, right? So my worry is that by not caring about why, or sorry, not the why, but how this thing came to be or how we created it, we fast forward 50 years and we've lost our ability to understand, how did we as a species get to where we are?
Oh, look, I have the exact same fear.
Right, and so then we're just kind of all weird automatons interacting with other automatons.
But
what is the human spirit?
I'm going to challenge you on this. First, I agree with you, but I'm going to play devil's advocate based on this human spirit debate.
Right.
When we went to school, the University of Illinois, and learned computer science and all of those things, we learned fundamentals of computers.
Sure.
We learned vacuum tubes, binary, the parts of the machine, programming, firmware, and chips.
Yep.
And worked our way up through the evolution of tech from first principles all the way up.
Yep.
But if you jumped on the train 20 years later,
yep, they don't even teach that stuff anymore.
they don't teach it anymore,
Yep.
right?
That's true.
So the new generation of computer scientists are already automatons abstracted away from how it works. Right?
Yeah, and I mean, in some sense, I don't know how to make this table. I don't, there's things I have and that I can use that I don't understand how it came to be.
Yeah.
But I at least trust that somehow I could detangle it to that we as a people made that possible, right? I can take pride in that, right?
Well,
but that is going away.
Well, and yeah, I think so. I think it's going away. I agree with that. It's sad. I'm sad that it's going away.
Yep.
It's interesting. I just finished a book called 1 Second After, where EMPs fry all circuits in the United States. And it's 1 second after starts after that moment,
Yep.
right? So good book recommendation for anyone who's interested.
And I'm a technologist that would be useless in that situation, right?
So so it inverts society where the people that were preppers that are used to living with no electricity are now the king of the hill, right? That have food stores in their basement, and the white collar technologists are you know what I mean? How do we get food, right? So I think it completely was a reset. You play these things out over a long enough period of time, and how what you're doing, what you call human spirit, as you move away from fundamental understanding, you're increasing your liability in a reset factor.
Agreed. Yeah.
Right?
That's maybe another aspect of the fear, right? That we won't be able to create anything anymore. Like,
well, and this is let's bring it back to music for a second, because
Right.
this is like we were going down the attribution path, but I'm going to take us down a different path than the music thing. Because my big fear is the lack of diverse music in the
yep,
future.
that's actually maybe a better
Right?
idea. Yeah.
So in yes, there's attribution, and attribution protects artist rights and IP rights. But the sadder thing for me is when I stop hearing new things.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, I derive no more joy than when I hear an original voice and an original song at Mountain Winery. Like, just, that is like my happy place on the planet, when I hear something just brand new. Great Hawaiian guitar player came, just like someone that, like, that just hits me. Like, that is my happy place, right? Now, if I take a look at, this AI thing, right? Where if it's reinforcing training based on prior art,
Yep.
and it continues happening, and society, like, to support artists, you need people willing to pay, listen to, and enjoy
Yep.
a new experience. But if society grows up in demanding more of the same, and like, I had this problem with my kids when they were young. They wanted to watch the same Mickey Mouse episode over again.
Right.
And I had to program them that I'm like, yes, I know you like Goofy Baby as a Mickey Mouse episode, but there are other Mickey Mouse episodes, and there's non-Mickey Mouse shows as well.
Right.
Like, I had to evolve them away from the repetitive addictive behavior.
Yep.
And I think we can all agree that that's happening in social media. The addiction created with social media
Yep.
is like reinforcing addictive behavior. Now you put AI and music into it,
Yep.
and if everyone becomes accustomed to like the EDM version of, thing, then where's the support for the new creative
Exactly.
arts, right?
That's
The new original data to train deviation over time, you fast forward 4 generations,
Yep.
and it's gone.
Yeah, I mean, that's why attribution and saying who the creator is important, right? Because
But how does attribution solve it?
it's I guess it's just part of the convention that we have, which is that if I create something fundamentally new, I can become famous, right? And someone will know that I did that.
But
and
do
it's
people care?
the person who
Like, the
created
person
it.
who created it has pride.
Yeah.
But that doesn't, like, I think it may slow down the end. Like, I read this book, Arthur C. Clarke, Childhood's End.
Okay.
And it gets into this. This is like, how does the world end in the future? Right? It's one of those 1950s dystopian books. But, like, it fast forwards to a society, it, like, goes fairly far distant into the future, where all the Maslow's hierarchy of needs are solved by aliens.
Okay.
Right? Where humanity now doesn't have to worry about money, doesn't have to worry about living. It can, like, pursue passion. Like, we end up in that place in that book. And what happens is by removing the struggle, you've eliminated originality. And I hate this, like, use the, every country song starts with, like, I broke up and my dog died, and like, you know what I mean? But, like, it's the struggle, it's your human experience that gave you the fuel.
Sure.
Right? Like, Taylor Swift's breakups are like, the next $1 billion song. So, like, I think that element of it is AI gonna help take that away. Because I think if you don't live, what do you write?
No, that's fair. I think in the realm of the true creative spirit of, like, humans, let's say art, something like that, maybe. I'll give you maybe.
Maybe.
I actually now, I'm not sure that applies, because, AI is everywhere now. It's everything.
Yeah.
Do we gain, philosophy, we talked about that before. Like, philosophy, I have no idea what the motivation for philosophy is, like why you would be a philosopher or anything. Because I don't think you get known until you're dead or whatever. But these are the things where original thought,
Yeah.
this stuff is important.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure. I personally, I love AI, by the way. If I'm coming across as not liking, I use it all the
I
time.
am as well.
Like,
Right?
so,
I'm a convert in terms of
but,
use a lot.
I abdicate thought to it sometimes, right? I'm trying to think of, like, a good example, but I mean parenting strategies. I'm like, this is happening. What can I do here, right?
My performance review at work was
actually,
really
that one's a good one. I don't know. So it's somehow this is all a tangled mess of I latch onto these certain uses of AI and I have visceral responses of, no, damn it, you didn't create that thing. Like something weird happened. I don't know what it is.
Well, is that just because you're wired differently as an architect and you want to know how things work? Like, not everyone takes apart the car. Like, I met the Cade Colgate, one of our sales guys. He bought a new guitar over Christmas, and the first thing he did was take it apart to see if it was built right. Yeah. Right? Not every musician does that. He's just different kind of breed.
I think I'm deeply philosophical by nature.
Yeah.
And so I see a just existential problem that we as technologists are bringing about, and I'm doing it willfully.
Yeah.
I'm we're all part of it because it's super cool. Like it's not.
Are we responsible?
Probably. But it's going to happen anyway. But I think I start to get concerned when we maybe hubris is the word that I'm worried about.
Hubris.
Right? Like that I created this amazing thing. Look at this. If I take it back to like writing a document or coding or anything, it's like, this is a work of art. It's perfect. It's exactly how I wanted it. I told the machine to make it that way.
Yeah.
And I have to question, could we have made it ourselves? And I don't know. And I mean, there's plenty of analogies of where this is how we are, right? I mean, we can't farm by ourselves. We can't, grow food by ourselves. Like, we've
this is the next industrial revolution.
We've created machinery everywhere to do everything, right? But this one just is, I find it to be different because it's in the realm that I think if you rewound 15 years ago and you asked most people in the technology field, could you have a system that can generate things that seemed original to you and just ask it to do that? I think most people would say no. That was not a thing.
But look, you couldn't see the Industrial Revolution coming either, right?
Yeah, that's right.
As a mass, we're bad at predicting the tipping points.
Yeah.
Right? You don't see them happening, And one of the things I find interesting is I read a lot, and I'm partial to a lot of end of humanity stories, right? The quote that sits with me well is, the world ends with a whisper, not a bang. You don't see it coming.
Yeah.
Global warming might be killing us. We might be in the middle of a 300-year thing, or we might not, right?
Yep.
It's not like one big new, almost uniformly what all original sci-fi authors have agreed on is it typically ends and transforms slowly, and you never see it
coming. Yeah.
Right.
And I hope this is not one of those things. It's so super cool that everyone is literally going to use this. The world just changed, right?
Yeah.
And
do you think Asimov had it right then? Was it are we at the beginnings of iRobot?
That's an interesting one. I don't know. I'm hoping it's not like Foundation where we're about to go through a dark age, but no, it's cool. And I mean, to take the other side, I do want people creating things using AI because I do think it's better. Like I do think, you probably are able to achieve things even with your music background.
Yeah.
You didn't have to. You were able to get to an outcome that was what you were looking for way faster, which means you can make more things.
And I'll give you the personal story. Like my wife, when my kid was born, I'm like, I'm going to write a song or a lullaby for my child. Like, it was just a dad wanting to be a good dad, right?
Yeah.
I'm like, I have a skill. And then, I kind of never got around to it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And my wife still reminds me of that. You know what I mean? He's much older now, and she's like, yeah, remember that time you said,
you were going to compose
you were going to compose that thing. And she's like, I know you're capable of it because you've composed other things. Do You Not Love Our Son,
Right.
And I was like, okay, God, I'm just going to shut up and not say anything because I'm going to get in trouble. But and then, last weekend when he had a Broadway play, with almost no thought, effort, and 30-second prompt engineering,
right.
I got a 3-minute song about how he's going to do great in his frickin' school play.
Right.
Right? So if the barrier to entry wasn't lower,
right.
it's yes, there's a capability, there's a thing.
Yep.
right? But I'm like, no, I did that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like that, and that's my hubris. I think
Yeah.
that's my hubris speaking, saying because it was easier.
Yeah, but you did and that's where I will give you you did do that, right? I mean the like in a truly causal sense of the world, like I mean that outcome happened because you chose to do things, right?
Yeah.
And so you absolutely get credit for that,
Yeah.
right? But
For
it's
the intent.
for the intent, and even wanting to have the outcome that
Yeah.
he has a cool song that's about him
Yeah.
and personalized and all that stuff. I've used AI to create little children's stories for my daughter. She's like obsessed with My Little Pony.
So explain that. Like, how are you using it?
I mean, so that's where I don't think I'm creating it. My prompts are the dumbest prompts you could come up with. I'll be like, my daughter is named Mira, and she is 4 years old. She's really into My Little Pony. Can you write me a story where she goes there and has an experience? And then bam, story. Right. And I read it to her, and she was like, can we listen to that again? And then we listened to it again. I was like, do you want something else to happen? We can have anything to happen.
No.
And then so then I continued the conversation with, she just wanted to go back. I was like, okay, she wants to go back. And then I wrote the story. And then she was like, I want there to be, I want Nightmare Moon to be in the story. And I want all this stuff to happen. And so I did that. And there's a third story. And it just cranked it out.
Yeah, like, so it's interesting.
So, I mean, I didn't write those stories. I want to be clear. Like, I in no universe would claim authorship of those stories because I typed out 4 sentences.
You're such an engineer because you're like, it's only mine if I put work in. Because you're equating it to the amount of effort, right?
Oh man, I don't know. I mean, so I feel like I went on to what's that? You can pay lookalikes to send you a little
cameos,
right? Yeah. Like I feel like I paid someone to just write like a little story for my daughter to make her happy.
Yeah.
And sure, I would happily claim I paid for that if I did that. But that's the amount of effort I put into it.
Yeah. No, I agree with that. I think that's kind of how it works.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's pivot gears, right? I think I was playing around with some of these music apps to see how good they're getting in these algorithms and, music language models. And, I've looked at things around deepfake apps where with 10 words I could create a fake Naveen, right, and make a phone call as you. Maybe in our next podcast we'll just try that for the audience and show people how to deepfake their best friend.
Continue the dystopian discussion.
Or, there are consumer apps, and one we discovered was Suno, which I think I shared with you. And I was like, how do I put this to work at Pure Storage, like in the context of work? So I asked it, write me a song about why Pure Storage is better than NetApp. And like maybe a country sad blues song. Michelle, my admin, we were like kind of tossing around things. And it wrote I think, fairly good song. Like it was rich, it was like right level of sadness, country twang, just did a very good job. But, as coming from my engineering background, I always need an A/B test. So like I, asked the exact same prompts and said, write me a song, country, sad, blues, whatever, song about why NetApp is better than Pure Storage. And then I was able to listen to both songs. And I think I shared that with you via email, right?
Yeah.
And my outcome, but what I realized, and I'm not saying this is a Pure Storage employee, just the content and the lyrics and the meaning of the Pure Storage song was better. Pure Storage is better than NetApp, was a better song than NetApp is better than Pure. It was some of the lyrics were, and I'll put links to the songs afterwards, right? But the first song was, NetApp's a tangled mess, it's got all these things, and then the second song was NetApp's trusted like an old freight train. You know what I mean? Kind of, I think we share some similar attributes where we're why, how, why did this happen? So I lost a night of sleep trying to figure out why this happened. And I was able to find the lyrics through some ChatGPT and Google searches to figure out on Reddit, these were quotes and things that were used.
Oh wow, that's pretty cool.
Right? So in the first song, I realized the training data set that's out in the public domain, statistically, which is the training data set. In this case, Reddit was a lot of the training data set, apparently. There's just a lot of good things people are saying about peer storage. And those things and their experiences and that. And then, so if the NetApps couldn't actually have like real training data, then it had to produce statistical inference in analogies because it didn't have a strong positive training base.
Yeah.
So my thesis, and I'm kind of curious if you agree with this thesis, is we're in, I would say, the 1 yard line of, the 100 yards in AI. We're at the very beginning of the journey,
yeah.
Right? So when you get to the 50, 60 yard line, maybe 10 years from now, maybe 5, who knows timing, right? But when AI hits terminal velocity, and it's like air, and it's the way we didn't grow up in the era of iPhones and social media. We grew up before those existed, but people born after a certain thing became the iPhone generation. Like they don't know what opening on a map is like, right?
Right.
And I mean the paper maps, not like swipe Google Maps, right?
Exactly.
So
Rand
like,
McNally.
yeah, Rand McNally, right? We all know Rand McNally. Well, we don't all know Rand McNally, but if you're over a certain age, you know Rand McNally. What I would state is, I think when there's good training data, good things are identified based on data creation. And I think humans are the data creators here, or maybe machines are.
Yeah.
But positive signal accelerates and reinforces faster.
That's right.
And negative signal amplifies faster. So what it would mean for society is good things get better faster and bad things die faster.
Yes.
And then in software engineering or in VC land, right, versus I'm spreading my bets on 100 companies and one's going to hit.
Yeah.
You can decide to cut your losses sooner. And how much do we, let's say that plays out.
Yeah.
Are we going to lose anything on something originally when Facebook started? It was everyone knocked it because it was losing billions of dollars a year. And it was where's this going? And is this going to be solvent? And now we see where it is at now, right? But I was around in the early days where everyone's that was a risky investment at bet. Is that going to go anywhere? Is that you know what I mean? So are we going to lose the creative next thing if AI amplifies good and bad isn't, or moonshots aren't around? You know what I mean?
That's an interesting question.
What does it mean for society?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really interesting question. Because I was thinking, it's decision loops, right? It's we can make decisions faster, and we can let's go that way because critical mass accumulates faster.
Self-reinforcing.
Yeah, it's self-reinforcing. I think I don't know if I will lose anything. I'm hopeful there. Weirdly enough, so I'm hoping that it means that we as people are generally want similar outcomes. We want our families to be happy. We want whatever it is, but. I'm hoping that we find that we all actually want similar things and we can more quickly triangulate on them and develop them and be that technology. Technology will actually be things that people want and need and solve their actual problems because we can say, hey, is this an actual need? And we could quickly find out, that's truly an actual need and I should go make that. And I'm hoping it would actually mean we make better products as opposed to I guess, there's the argument of, well, you need to throw a bunch of things at the wall, and one of them you might not know is going to stick, and it's going to be totally change things, right? So I'm more hopeful that actually we'll be able to make conscious decisions to make things that are useful.
Okay. So I'm going to ask you one final question, and then we'll probably wrap up. In AI and music, we talked about the creative process, and we talked about synthesis, reasoning, but when will AI be able to reason, right? And will it be able to reason, and will we get there in music? Will there be original art in AI?
So, these are things actually I've never wanted to say out loud, so I'm oh God, I hope nobody does this.
Everything you say now, someone will look at in 20 years and be why were we so wrong?
Yeah, we're such morons. Yeah, but I mean, my fear. So I actually think we're getting there. This is actually starting to happen. I don't know if you saw. OpenAI just announced that They've created I don't remember what they call it, operator, I think, but where it can actually take control of your screen and do things on your computer, right? So I already think that AIs demonstrate pretty good.
Is it reasoning or mimicking?
No, I actually think it's building a internal model of what's happening.
Okay.
So actually, sorry, I should back up. I actually used to think human intelligence was very, very fascinating. It's like, wow, we're like amazing, and there's something we'll never crack about that. As AI has sort of just absorbed information and built sort of a statistical model of not information itself, just in its raw form, it starts to be able to create things that appear to be inference and appear to be reasoning.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually wonder if that's how my brain works. And so I actually think it is demonstrating forms of reasoning already.
Mm-hmm.
The thing it's not demonstrating yet is free will, but I
Mm-hmm.
think we're starting to give it that.
Well, so if I kind of come back to this, right? Daniel Kahneman won a Nobel Prize. He wrote Thinking Fast and Slow, one of like the foremost kind of psychological books about how the brain works, right? And he posits that you have different thinking modes of like fast reasoning and slow reasoning. You know, people think conscious, subconscious,
Yep.
right? And around background processing. And if you read Look Again, which is another book, it talks about habituation and why your brain is really good at habitualizing to an environment and filtering out noise. So if we go on a vacation, right, and this is from Look Again, Attribution, by the way, the concept was like, okay, the first day in Hawaii is amazing. And day 3, the ocean is orange and the sand is amazing. And by day 6 or 7, we've acclimated and the new euphoria created with a new environment
Yep.
has worn off. So, and that if you combine the Look Again kind of philosophy with the Daniel Kahneman philosophy, the thing that's missing, I think, in the reasoning argument with AI is hormones, right? So when you think about the brain, there's like, you know, we haven't simulated
Yep.
the cortisol, adrenaline, epinephrine, like, even codeine, like all of the cycles of brain development that exist on the hormonal cycle has not been modeled into reasoning. And to some degree, that is part of the equation of what makes us human.
But we could model that.
You could, but the creative savants that change society are in the statistical abnormality.
That's interesting.
So where humanity gets
Interesting.
leaps from like the Musks of the world that are just different than the rest is their profiles, if you were to map their hormonal
Interesting.
profiles, overlaid with their, neural pathways,
Yeah.
you would find that they're not in the statistical norm.
Yeah.
So when you're building models that are reinforcing the same thing,
You lose
you
outliers.
lose stepwise gains
Yeah.
in independence and reasoning.
That's fascinating.
Like, because why was Mozart different when he was first there?
Yeah.
Why was he the genius in a world of composers?
Yeah.
Like, when we think about the people that fundamentally stepped it up, Michael Jackson did that in like the genre he was in, right? Like where does that come from? Those people are wired differently.
Yeah.
And in tech, that's true too.
That is true. Yeah.
So I think the
Free Solo. What's his name? Free Soloed El Capitan.
yeah,
Yeah. Like different.
different.
Impressive.
Yeah.
And it's a great achievement. Yeah. No, that's a great point.
So now you work at Pure Storage. So where do you think Pure, what's Pure's role in it? Is there a Pure Storage role in all of this AI stuff or no?
I think it's in the information side. So everything we've talked about was about having access to a tremendous amount of information and being able to model it and then synthesize something.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's where Pure's place is right now, is enabling.
But why? There's other storage companies. Like, why does Pure have a place? Why should we be in that space?
I mean, I think it's just making the ability to store something commodity, but but the ability to access it at scale. And
can't other people do that? What makes us unique?
I mean, I think we're basically following the laws of physics to create something that's extremely dense but highly performant, right? I mean, that's the key thing that I think differentiates us.
Well, and look, I would agree with that, but for folks who don't know, I think you follow the disk curves of like hard drives and information, and kind of towards the end of Moore's law, where you're seeing density and power economics in the 20 to 24, 30 terabyte range. So what you were saying was we're creating these 150, 300. We're on a path where performance, density, and power, right, those three elements are something that we're ahead of the pack right now.
Yeah, we're writing Moore's law, ahead of where other vendors are on the storage curve. Yeah.
Why can we do it, and why aren't other people doing it? Like, if this is so necessary and everyone agrees in AI, why are we doing it?
Why? I mean, I think we saw it way before everyone, so we have a fundamental edge. But yeah, I mean, the key thing is, I think honestly, a lot of people think of storage as just something where you need something dense and you just put data in place, and the more I can store and have available at some future time, the better. I think we've always thought of it from the perspective of, the composition of that hardware and how it's accessed by software matters. Mm-hmm. So it's not that I just put it there, but that I can access it at, high bandwidth and low latency. Yeah. And those things are important. Now, as we get into, now I want to be able to use random information, because again, that's what AI can do. It can just basically say, this is stuff that nobody told it why this works the way it does, but I can now use that to build a model. We're going to find that we want every bit of data we have everywhere. And if you can't access it, you can't use it.
Yeah, look, I think part of it was like, we saw it first, but I actually kind of think something we just left in. There was another element, which I think, we made a good decision that kind of played in our favor, in that we started collecting data very early around how NAND performs in the wild. So with Pure One, we collect data, and it turns out our hardware engineering team that's creating these drives look at electron wear and NAND density, and because we now know, hey, SQL database is reading this way and Oracle's reading that way, and this is how things read and write, and this kind of idea, at some point, you always wonder how far you're going to go till you hit kind of the end of Moore's law. You worked at Intel, I'm sure that was always a debate.
Yeah, and
right?
It's coming.
And well,
may have happened.
You can probably follow things down a physics path.
Right.
But at some point, then you can split the cohorts, where if you start creating smaller cohorts, saying, how does it perform for Oracle versus Hadoop? And those are two different things. Then you can ensure your NAND wear and media and your, how you fundamentally design for that workload in your firmware becomes more personalized.
Yep.
And I think that can extend the generation of Moore's law hundreds of years.
Oh yeah, I mean, I don't know about hundreds, but definitely longer. I'll give you longer.
I'm going to posit that the smaller your cohorts, the easier the engineering problem.
Maybe.
Right? So if you keep dividing your cohorts and you can super specialize, the extension in each particular use case is exponential.
Yep, but yeah, we are definitely, I think we are, one of the things Pure does is through our software, we basically cover up a lot of the complexities of manufacturing, silicon devices that store data, right? I mean, there's errors, there's failures, there's power becomes a problem, heat becomes a problem, and I think we manage those things. And so, those are hard things. We've invested in them, and that gives us an edge. But
cool. Well, okay. So we've talked for a bit. Our first kind of set of random musings, and music to a lot of things. So final word. What would you want people to conclude from today's conversation?
I guess the first thing is, if there's somebody out there who has not used AI of some form, please try it out, because I mean,
public service announcement.
Exactly. Hopefully that person doesn't exist, but there still are people that I run into them, right?
There's a lot of them, because we live in Silicon Valley. I think you forget we're in a microcosm.
Maybe, yeah, that's true. And so I think it's important for everyone to have a firsthand experience with what's going on. because everything I don't think people should be reading forming their opinions on what other people think.
Yeah.
I think we as a society all need to have firsthand experience with this.
I agree with that.
So,
Anything else? Any other conclusions?
I'll have to think about what it means to create something, but
Yeah. All right. Well, next time we'll talk about a different topic.
yeah,
Thanks.
sounds good.
Thanks. I enjoyed our conversation.
Yep, that was great.